Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me again on this second installment video of producing the Orgonite molds. Um, if you were listening to the show Beyond the Strange last night, we definitely went through it and talked about a lot of this. So, the first video you got to see, give you a little insight into it so that you're not so lost on the process of what I'm doing. So a little less explanation is needed, and I can just focus more on what I'm doing. So get ready here. Get everything I need. And I also wanted to, maybe while I'm doing this, show you how I make the the rounds that I make as opposed to the cylinders, which are used. These glass tubes are what I use to make the cylinders, and then these are what I use to make the skateboard wheels, as some like to call them. They're, just rounds, biscuits, whatever you call them. And this one's kind of half done, so I have a little bit of already in there, and a little swirl on top with I believe that was a blue calcite that's in there. And I'll show you how I finish those. So let's get started with the mold part. And I've already got the first portion that I did in the video you saw already. So now what we have is the second area. I've already started to lay down what I want for the second layer. And like I said, I have this larger inset piece that I detailed in the other video. So we'll be setting this in there. And I had ideas of putting it up and down inside the unit, but it's a little bit too tall for the unit, for the mold itself, so it would come out of the top if I were to set it straight up and down. Which is fine, because most times you'll be holding it in your lap. I mean, that's how I do it, or set it next to me on like a couch or on a table. So that'll be okay for these purposes. So just to make sure that this one is in the center, and then I'm going to add two smaller hematites, which I actually left in the other room, so I will have to go get those. I apologize for that. Once I do pour the liquid into the mold, we'll be setting a little bit extra stuff in there, and I'll slowly get you guys over here so you can come and look inside what I have there. I have the original from yesterday, and you can see that it is hard, nice and hard. So perfect, no cracks, no nothing, just right. And then I have this in the center right there, and then I wanted to make sure, if you can see, I have these two pieces that I tried to make sure were pretty well centered there with the center of the hematite. It's a little bit off. That should be okay. So that's how I'm going to do that layer. And then there'll be some shards of rocks in there that I'll drop here and there. Not like I did in the top, or as I'll do near the bottom, but just kind of strategic placements that I feel will be good for little intermediary areas between here. Because you see, I feel like you have these voids here, which will need a little bit of a tuning there, because those voids can sometimes allow negative energies to build vortexes and hide. So that's something you don't necessarily want. You got to account for as well. So we have to make sure we keep the internal area free of any areas where negative energy might hide, in what Les kind of referred to yesterday in the show as a gray area. Um, and for any of those watching that are not familiar with Beyond the Strange or the Fate or Nots and who I'm speaking about as far as names go, please join us on Beyond the Strange, or listen to the radio show Jimmy Church Fade to Black. Please join us there and you can find out a lot about this stuff as well. So if you're new to that, but I imagine that most of the people listening are people that know me already. Shameless plug back there. It's mine and my wife's. So, all right. Set you guys down. And we'll start this layer. Sweet. About out of this gallon. It looks like we have about $1.50 there. So that's good. Like I said, I found that 5 ounces, 150 milliliters is pretty much the ideal application for this type of mold, merely because it gives you a good amount of area to work in, but not too much to where you'll end up with area where you can't get things to because of the fact of how much liquid you have in the area. So it can become difficult if you put too much in there. So you wouldn't want to do an entire mold at once, like an entire 15-ounce mold at once would probably not be ideal because you'll have problems with suspension, you'll have problems with stuff drifting all the way to the bottom before it thickens. So doing it in stages like this is pivotal to having the suspension look and to having your pieces layered in there just properly so that you make sure that you're not having too much confliction in what you're trying to make. $1.52. Remember, alkalis, scary. Be very careful. Don't want to get any on you. Stir, mix it. And if you notice today, it's not as cold during this video, so we're getting a lot better of a mix. It's just what I would consider just right. So when you start getting that, it almost looks like, it looks kind of like thickening jello, or maybe like a hair gel. And that's pretty much a really good consistency. And you want to make sure that you stir it real good to make sure that your catalyst is through there very well. You don't want to have any areas that aren't doing what they're supposed to, because you can end up with holes in areas which you don't want. That can get annoying. I've had that happen in the rounds designed and in the cylinders, because the cylinders can get voids because it's hard to get all of the material down into the little facets that are done inside of each of the little insides of these, because you pretty much have to stack all the materials first and then pour into it, which is a far different and more difficult application than just with this. So now we'll just take this, and I like to pour it over the stones first to give them a good coating, to make sure that they get nice and evenly coated. Just so you don't have too many air bubbles around them, because you can get air bubbles around them and make them not as visible, but they're still, fairly visible. You just don't get the color vibrance out of each of them. And you can pour slow, you can pour fast. It all depends on how you like it. I like to pour nice and slow and make sure I get good coverage. And as you pour along, and fill it all up perfectly. 5 ounces looks like it's gonna just about cover the top of these fairly well. And because there is a time lapse between the layers, which I usually do not do, because I'm usually doing it all at once, and I couldn't do on them all at once because it didn't work out that way this time, so I had to do them in stages, which is okay. Makes it a little easier for planning purposes, but this is a lot different of a process at this point if you're not doing it right away when your other application is still somewhat wet and not completely dried like this one is overnight. And I'm pouring a little acetone in here to start the cleaning process to break that down. So what you're going to have is you're going to have air that's going to be below your area. So come slide over here. And you see right there, you see how you have those bubbles that are slowly creeping up there from down in the corners. Now what I like to do is I'll just lightly tap the form and just give it that light tap, and you'll just slowly see those bubbles, and they'll slowly rise up, and you won't have to worry about it, and they'll all come out of your way. That's very good. That's coming out nice. Now I will take an amethyst and drop it just there. Another amethyst right there. A couple of my little lapis here. Drop lapis right there. Lapis there. Quartz copper ring. It's right there. A piece of amethyst here. And try and get it to fall just on top of that. Sometimes you can get in there and push stuff where you'd like it to be. And got some of this steel. Just put it in between here to kind of help the combination there between the two. Just ever so slightly. Here and there. Just like that. Alright. And then I'll give you a little light. And you'll see it's got that yellow color to it. You can see the steel dropped in there. Kind of just drifts down to the surface of the original application. And we'll grab some of this, sprinkle it just on these corners here. This is the brass and copper shavings, along with a little steel in there. Just along those corners. Perfect. And leave that centerpiece nice and visible. Got a little blurry there on you. So there you go. Another application. We'll do one more where we'll add a couple more stones to the mix that will go in these open areas above the two amethyst and quartz crystals. And we'll use, as I was saying, I have blue calcite there, and I have a green calcite, and I have a snowflake obsidian, and a jasper. Kind of harder to see. It's not letting it. There you go. Very beautiful stone. So, I hope you enjoyed this application and hope it comes out well. Thank you. Love and light.